So much bad information, so much good information. Where do I begin? So let's talk about the craziness that is engulfing the graded video game marketplace at present time. And I already know the comments I'm going to get. Oh, Sean, it's linked to the overall decrease in asset prices related to stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency. Everything's going down because the Fed's fighting inflation. Unfortunately, my friends, my brothers, my sisters that watch this channel, that is 100% false. When we look at the market for graded video games, certain games are now down 50, 60, 70, and in some cases 80%. A lot of those prices are never coming back because there's one thing that you guys don't seem to understand, some of you anyway. There's going to be more supply that is going to end up hitting the market at some point, which is going to keep driving some of those prices down. Now, to be fair, are there exceptions to every rule? Are there going to be some of these games that are going to bounce back, or potentially we can get moving forward and another speculative bubble could hit the graded video game collecting space? Could that happen? Yes, potentially. But for the most part, you've already seen the height of some of these prices for a lot of these games, especially Nintendo 64 games, because they were over speculated upon, because a lot of people out there, including myself, knew that there was a fair amount of supply of that stuff out there, to the point that those that had it, they knew how to pretty much trickle it in to the population reports, to the grading companies, and then consign it to auction houses for high sums. You also had market manipulators. You had investors coming in. You had Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters thinking this was going to be the next big thing. Hey, Nerdy Girl Comics, how's it going? And other people trying to pretty much manipulate this particular market and or profit from it. And I've said this from the beginning. You guys have got to understand how speculative bubbles operate if you are going to be successful in the antiques and collectibles trade. I told you guys time and time again, you sell into the hype. You do not buy into the hype. You don't listen to dentists. You don't listen to high-profile market manipulators. You don't listen to people that are coming into these markets raising hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to set up an LLC, limited liability company, for those of you that may not know what that means, to try to buy in to this particular market bubble. It is a fool's game. The antiques and collectibles trade is built on nothing but speculation. So is the market for cryptocurrency. I'm not talking about the market for cryptocurrency today, though. Just know the entire antiques and collectibles trade is built on speculation. It doesn't matter if we're talking about rare coins, high-end pieces of art, video games, Pokemon cards, comic books, G.I. Joe figures, used condom wrappers. I don't care what it is, guys. It's all built on the greater fool theory. The only difference is, and again, this is important, the antiques market and the collectibles market have similarities, but they also have differences, which is why I tell you, if you're trying to invest long-term in these markets, a lot of you would be better off looking on the antique side of the equation. That said, you want to speculate, you want to get in, get your money and get out, collectible side works best because that particular market is full of volatility. That's what makes a lot of these prices pop and then come back down. That's why I tell you, going back to point one, you sell into the hype. You do not buy into it, guys. I don't care what market it is. This was a mistake that people were making back in the 1980s when graded coins became a thing. Some of the prices of some of those coins never got back to their original highs. And as you guys are going to see, video games aren't going anywhere. Video games are still going to be collectible going forward. I want to reassure all of you on that. But a lot of these prices are never, ever going to return to the highs that they hit. I don't think you're going to see another Super Mario 64 in 9.8 condition ever sell for $1.5 million or more anytime soon. Now, what does this all mean? Well, if you read some of the comments that are occurring on Instagram, which I am not on Instagram, by the way. I am not a huge fan of social media. I do have a Facebook account. Some of the comments that are appearing in Facebook collecting groups or online collecting forums. You would think that the Timmies have all lost their proverbial minds. Believe it or not, the Timmies solution to this problem is, well, what if the auction companies stop taking these particular items right now, offering them for sale, and let the market just level out? So basically, your solution is to let auction companies manipulate the market again because you're not getting the result you want after the grading company and certain auction companies got together and colluded to manipulate the market in the beginning. Does anybody see the insanity in that? Does anybody understand that grading companies, auction companies, and high-profile investors are not your friends? Grading companies have a responsibility to the customers that pay to get their items graded. They should not be operating in the secondary market. They should not be operating among auction companies solely. Grading companies' purpose is to remain completely impartial and neutral in any of these markets. Doesn't matter if we're talking currency, coins, video games, toys, Pokemon cards, whatever it is. The grading company must remain impartial and must not cater to the secondary market in any manner. Now, on the flip side, auction companies have a fiduciary responsibility to their consignors. They should not be catering to buyers. They should not be catering to the market by and large. Auction companies, their service is to act as a go-between and bring a seller and a buyer together on a fair, level playing field, also known as a marketplace. That's all an auction company should do. Now, to be fair, there is a little bit of hype there because they have to advertise those particular items that are being consigned to them to get the Timmies, Kimmies, Poindexters, speculators, investors, collectors, all to come together and bid them up and buy them. You know, guys, it is very easy to market nostalgia to the masses, especially if a portion of those masses are collectors, because you are automatically wired to view a lot of these items as quote-unquote rare investments, artifacts, and the like. Do you understand that? Your brain is wired to buy and pay a premium for a lot of these items. That's why, if you notice, guys, the book, The Psychology of Money, has been in the background for a lot of my videos for several months now. Caddy Corner of Killer Stuff and Tons of Money. Those are two books you need to read if you want to be a successful speculator, collector, investor operating in these markets. Now, before I go off on a rant in this, going back to the point where some of the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters think that the auction companies should stop taking this particular items on consignment and let the market level out. Let it be that it perceives a lot of these items that are out there as being rare simply because the auction companies are refusing to auction them off at present time. Are you aware, back in the year 2000, Christie's and Sotheby's paid $512 million in fines because it was determined. And again, both companies, I think, at that particular time, did not admit any wrongdoing, but they engaged in what would appear to be price fixing and collusion. So a lot of you out there that are recommending that auction companies and grading companies now submit to your needs and wants simply because you're a Timmy operating in an unregulated market that you don't understand. You also need to realize that if auction companies do that, they have a potentially bigger problem at hand, because now the FTC could potentially get involved if they would go down that route. Now, I'm going to read an article that I am going to put a link to in the video description below that premiered in the Wall Street Journal on September 25th, year 2000. So this article is over 22 years old. Remember what I told you guys. We are going back to the 80s and 90s, baby, with acquisitions, market manipulation, mass-produced scarcity, high-profile investors coming into these markets, manipulating it, murkying the waters to the point where you now have dentists trying to set up LLCs to sell and invest in graded video games while prices are hitting all-time highs, which makes no sense to me and goes against every core teaching I've ever had in economics. But hey, he is a dentist. What can I say? So I'm going to read you this article. The link's below. And I just want to put a shameless plug here. You guys are aware I am a consultant in the antiques and collectibles trade. For as little as $50 an hour, I could show you how to avoid making massive mistakes like this. And I know, hard to believe, dude recording videos at 1 o'clock in the morning out of his basement office has all this knowledge. I know, it's completely mind-boggling. But if you don't like me, maybe you think I'm an arrogant asshole, all you got to do is research and read books on other experts in the antiques and collectibles trade. And pretty much, they all share my point of view, a very similar point of view as to how these markets work and operate over the short term and over the long term. So without further ado, let's read this article entitled Christie's Sotheby's Agree to Pay $512 million Collusion Settlement. Sotheby's Holdings Incorporated and rival Christie's International agreed to pay $512 million to settle claims by art buyers and sellers that the auction houses colluded on prices and cheated them, with nearly 1/3 of the tab to be paid by Sotheby's former chairman, A. Alfred Taubman. You guys know that I am horrible in name pronunciations, so please forgive me if I butchered that particular individual's name. The proposed civil settlement comes as Justice Department prosecutors are reaching a critical stage in their 3-year criminal probe of the world's largest auction houses. They are close to reaching agreements with Sotheby's and its former chief executive, Diane Dede Brooks, that would secure their testimony against Mr. Taubman in exchange for leniency and lighter penalties, according to people familiar with the matter. See that, guys? Even these top-tier investors, auction companies, there's no friends here. They're not having dinner with the dudes on the collecting forums telling you how great Super Mario Brothers is, telling you how awesome that holofoil Charizard card is. They don't care about you. You want to know why? It's not in their interest to do so. When I work with an auction company, guess what? I don't want them to be friends with me. I want them to represent me if I am a consignor utilizing their firm, or treat me with respect if I am a buyer operating within their firm. That's it. I don't expect them to pull up a lawn chair, sit down with me in my front yard, and tell me how awesome Pokemon are, or how great the Magic the Gathering collecting community really is. Guess what, guys? If that's what you want, you are living in a fantasy world. You should be collecting books that are based in fiction, if that's really what you think the antiques and collectibles trade is supposed to be. Going back to this article. Through a spokesman, Mr. Taubman said he was looking to minimize the impact of the hefty civil settlement on Sotheby's, a company in which I have a keen financial interest. Ms. Brooks declined to comment. So here is the timeline of Christie's and Sotheby's, how this all went down. Now keep in mind, this is taking place all the way back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, because this article, again, was published in September of 2000. So they have a timeline here. January 28th, Christie says it uncovered evidence that allegedly relates to a price-fixing deal between Christie's and Sotheby's. January 31st, Christie's says it worked out a deal with government investigators for conditional amnesty from prosecution in the criminal price-fixing probe. Isn't it amazing that when the evidence comes before you, it's amazing how many people you'll sell out, even if it's your friends, colleagues, family members, business associates, whoever it is, you're throwing them under the bus to save yourself. Ah, yes, the benefits of acting immorally in an unregulated market that does apparently have some regulations, as we're seeing here. February 2nd, a leading art collector sues Sotheby's and Christie's, alleging they colluded to fix commission prices. Big no-no. Seeking unspecified damages and class action status. Now, comparing this to the wonderful video game, Timmies, let me read that again. Colluded to fix commission prices. So don't you think if auction companies started colluding to not list some of this merchandise or not put it up for sale when it is available, that could be a very, very gray area that legality may look unkindly upon, meaning it is possible. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't claim to be, but that could be a problem for some of you guys that want auction companies to now manipulate this market back to where it was when they manipulated it, alleged or helped manipulate it in the beginning. Guess what, guys? That's most likely not going to happen. I'm sorry, but you guys are chasing dragons. You let the proverbial cat out of the bag. You wanted the cat to be a thing. The cat became a thing, turned itself into a dragon. You're chasing the dragon, hoping that it becomes more and prices continue to rise. That is not going to happen, guys. We are where we are. People are realizing that most of this market has been hyped beyond belief, and there's a lot of high-profile collectors and investors that are now pulling out. I'm not going to go into detail on who any of my clients are in the antiques and collectibles trade from a consulting side point of view, but what I will tell you is I do have a lot of people that are coming to me, Sean, I need to get out of the graded video game marketplace. You are 100% correct in your analysis. Back to the article. On February 6th, European Union launches its inquiry into alleged limited competition on commissions. Remember, guys, overseas, my friends overseas in Europe, you guys have stricter regulations on a lot of these markets than we do in the U.S. And one thing that you got to understand is, especially when we talk about high-end art, Sotheby's and Christie's are international auction houses. They are not only operating under U.S. law and jurisdiction, they also have a presence in Europe and the like, even Asia. So as a result, they are under different guidelines, different regulations, different laws, depending on where and when they are operating. On February 27th, Chairman Alfred Taubman and President and Chief Executive Officer Deanna D. Brooks resigned. So obviously they didn't survive this. They resigned. August 1st, Sotheby's begins meeting with prosecutors to resolve the investigation, seeking leniency and later penalties in exchange for its cooperation. It's interesting how that works, huh? We'll cooperate. Just give us later penalties, but we're not admitting to any wrongdoing. So we didn't do it, but we're going to cooperate. But you got to give us leniency. Please give us leniency. We understand how these markets work. We're terribly sorry if we broke any laws. We didn't break any laws, but give us leniency. I love that. September 22nd, Sotheby's and Christie's agree to pay $512 million to settle civil claims. Going back to the article, in any case, the price-fixing allegations have been costly for Mr. Taubman, a wealthy shopping mall magnate who stepped down as Sotheby's chairman when the government's price-fixing investigation heated up earlier this year. Over the weekend, he reached a separate agreement with Sotheby's requiring him to pay $156 million of the company's $256 million share of the civil settlement. He also agreed to pay $30 million in cash to settle claims by Sotheby's shareholders Remember, guys, Sotheby's is a publicly traded company. At least at this time they were. I think they are still, if I recall correctly. So is Christie's. Been a while, though, because I do not own shares of stock in those companies, believe it or not. More on that, if you guys want to know why, in an upcoming video. I do not own shares of stock in any auction company that's publicly traded at present time. Who sued him and the company in a separate securities fraud lawsuit. In comparison, Sotheby's agreed to pay $50 million in cash and issue discount coupons to customers with a value of $50 million to be used as a credit against future sellers' commissions. You know, in my opinion, that's really scummy. And a lot of companies get away with that if they're found out. If price-fixing allegations are levied against the government, they are allowed, for whatever reason, to just offer like a voucher or like a gift certificate against future services. And I never agreed with that. I honestly think the government should get more strict and actually, if needs be, bankrupt these companies so that they can pay back in cash the amount of money that they pretty much incorrectly received due to involving themselves in unfair business practices. This money should go back to the customers in the form of cash. Funny note, since we are talking about graded video games, I don't know if you guys recall, back in the late 1980s, Nintendo was sued for allegedly pretty much handling or having a monopoly over the video game market. And that's why, those of you may remember this, I remember I used my $5 certificate on Super Mario Kart at the time, back in the early 1990s. Nintendo actually had to send out $5 certificates towards games. And I always thought that it would have been better if Nintendo had to pay out money directly to the end consumer that they supposedly hurt through this. Just because, isn't it interesting? Nintendo sent me a $5 certificate and I used it to buy a Nintendo video game. Nintendo most likely made a lot more than $5 on that particular sale. So really, a lot of these settlements that just involve like a gift certificate or a voucher going back to the company ends up making more money. Going back to the article, Sotheby's shareholders will be issued $40 million in Sotheby's Class A common stock as settlement for their fraud claims, on top of the $30 million Mr. Taubman has agreed to pay them. Christie's, closely held since 1998, also would owe $256 million under the deal, which is subject to approval by the judge overseeing the case. Sotheby's board approved the agreement last night. Of course they did. The class action lawsuit, which alleges that the price-fixing scheme, dated from 1992, was filed after Christie's made the startling disclosure in late January that it has been cooperating with the government in exchange for conditional amnesty. This suit was brought on behalf of customers of the auction houses. Of course, who else was going to sue them? Again, the customers generally have a responsibility and a right to be treated fairly. Market manipulation, as a lot of you guys are finding out in the graded video game space right now, doesn't hurt the auction companies. In most cases, it doesn't hurt the market manipulators, doesn't hurt the grading companies. It hurts you, little Timmy. That's why when you guys went in all your little collecting forums, there's this person named Reserved Investments who's in his 40s. He doesn't understand video games. We know these markets better. Yay! In your little Timmy voice. How's that working out for you now? Please tell me. Because I was selling into the market. See, I made my money. I sold into the hype. I didn't try to buy into it and tried to invest in these particular items long term. Going forward with this particular article, earlier this month, the federal judge overseeing the case allowed claims brought by people who bought and sold art abroad to be included in the U.S. suit. After concluding, they would rather settle than face the possibility of losing a court fight and having to pay triple damages, an amount that might have exceeded $1.3 billion, the auction houses reached a deal with plaintiffs' lawyers Friday afternoon, according to people familiar with the talks. The deal was first reported by the New York Times, of course. Lawyers for Sotheby's, which reported profit of just $32.85 million last year, immediately asked Mr. Taubman to cover a substantial portion of Sotheby's tab, according to people familiar with those talks. It isn't clear what portion, if any, Miss Brooks will pay. Mr. Taubman's 22.5% stake in Sotheby's is valued at about $249 million. Timmy, we are no longer in Kansas. We are dealing with real massive amounts of money and wealth here. Going on, the 75-year-old Mr. Taubman, a Bloomfield Hills, Michigan art collector, real estate tycoon, and philanthropist. I love how everybody who collects art and also is either a real estate tycoon or an investor is also a philanthropist. Can't forget that last part. Resigned as Sotheby's chairman in February amid allegations that the two auction houses had colluded on fixing the commissions paid by buyers and sellers of art. He bought Sotheby's in 1983 with the late Henry Ford II and another buyer, and bought the company public in 1989. For the 3 and 6 months ended June 30th, Sotheby's recorded special charges of $2 million and $3.8 million, respectively, for legal and other fees relating to the investigations and lawsuits. According to filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the company has been meeting with prosecutors since August to resolve the investigation, which began in May 1997 in exchange for lighter treatment. Of course, Christie's isn't likely to be prosecuted. Christopher Davidge, who resigned as the CEO of Christie's in December, is understood to have received assurances that he won't be prosecuted if he continues to cooperate with the government. And again, the rich get richer, the average person gets screwed, and of course, all the wealth still goes to the top, as this particular incident teaches us. Going forward and concluding the article, Mr. Davidge turned over significant documents to his former employer that enabled Christie's to receive immunity. He couldn't be reached for comment. That is the end of the article. Please learn from this. You guys that are operating in these markets, putting all your money, hopes, and dreams in comic books or Pokemon cards or even rare coins or artwork, whatever it is, you guys are crazy. In an upcoming video, I am going to show you how to actually invest, how to analyze investments in the antiques and collectibles trade, and combine a lot of the earlier teachings that I teach on this channel with taking it to the next level. So you guys are not going to be Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters going on collecting forums, telling everybody that, hey, I got a solution to the problem. The market's dropping 50, 60, 70%. You know what we need to do? All we need to do is get the auction companies to stop selling these particular items. Wow, Timmy. Wow, where did you go to college? Who taught you economics, business, and finance? That is one hell of an idea if you are a fucking idiot. Good night.